Right. Hello and welcome to Dark Alignment Podcast. I am Brittney.
And I'm Eruca Rose.
And we are a true crime astrology podcast.
We are.
We are, for sure. This is season 2, episode 11, which is very exciting.
Almost about to finish this season.
Yes, which is it's crazy that we've been doing this for over 2 years now. Kind of wild. So please, if you are viewing or listening to this, because there is a visual component to this podcast on YouTube, and then we're on all the other platforms too. But please like, follow, subscribe, rate, review, do all the things. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on TikTok. We're both personally on there. I'm at Britt Oakley, at
Eruca Rose. We have, the Dark Alignment TikTok.
The Dark Alignment, all the places, all the things. It's all connected, so you can really find us. If you find us in one spot, we have a Linktree.
And we do have Linktree. It's all connected. You can go on Linktree and see all of our things.
Yeah. I don't have my readings on there yet, but we're getting there. That's one of our goals, because you can book a reading with either one of us. I do tarot energy readings and dream interpretations.
And then I do tarot, rune, and mainly astrology readings, of course.
So also you can join our Patreon if you want extra bonus content. We just did a live for our Patreon people where we talked about big announcements that we have coming up for the next episode, for the finale, and for season 3. So we are doing some huge stuff. If you want to know,
if you want to be in the know, get on our Patreon.
Yes, it's very R+P. It's very rich and very popular. So yes, lots of big things coming for season 3, but we'll go ahead and get into the episode because this is Amy's signature episode.
I'm really excited. H.H. Holmes.
Yes, we are doing H.H. Holmes today.
He's one of my favorite stories, and I still don't remember that much detail. So.
But I'm excited that this is one that you're the most familiar with, probably out of all the stories we've done. And also, we did talk about H.H. Holmes in our crossover special that we did earlier in the season with the Astral Chat podcast. I think that was season 2, episode 2. I'm pretty sure. But we all shared kind of our favorite story and did like a mini look at each of our choices for like worst serial killer, most hated kind of vibe. So check that out if you haven't. But I'm going to start off with my sources, and there's quite a few here that I can't specifically list because I did do the thing where I binge a bunch of H.H. Holmes material for like several hours, and I'm just consuming it all after I complete my research. So there's extra things that I wrote, like handwritten on here, of like, oh, I like this, and I did not do a great job
add that in
of tracking the sources. But Wikipedia, as always, please donate if you use Wikipedia at all. A documentary called H.H. Holmes, America's First Serial Killer. There's a really good documentary on Hulu called H.H. Holmes, Original Evil. And then, like I said, like a whole bunch of other YouTube documentaries that are pretty good. There was one specifically that I sought out that talked about whether or not H.H. Holmes was Jack the Ripper. So we'll talk a little bit about that in
because there's
here.
a potential for him to be connected to another.
There's a lot of speculation. But he had, alleged
potential, maybe
perhaps. But his claim to fame, like kind of the big things that you will hear just in pop culture about H.H. Holmes, he had a lot of different names that he went by at different points of his life. So Herman Webster Mudgett was his original name. We know him as Dr. Henry Howard Holmes. So H.H. Holmes, that was what he ended up with for the remainder of his life. He was an American serial killer during the mid to late 1800s. His number of victims could be anywhere between 10 and 200, which is terrifying. The killings took place in Chicago in like a fucking murder castle that he built specifically to facilitate these crimes and these acts.
Which is so horrible and impressive.
It's horribly impressive is what it is. Yes, absolutely. So he was described as being an evil genius because he was obviously very intelligent. He was a doctor. Like, you don't get there from being unintelligent by any means. He had a lot of ambition and a lot of drive. He was also a big-time con artist. So here we go. We're getting into it. Trigger warning. So much murder. We're dealing with
a lot of murder in this.
We're dealing with a murder castle, y'all. So buckle the fuck up. Here we go. So he was born May 16th, 1861 in Gilmanton, I don't know, New Hampshire. New Hampshire. So when he was a kid, he was Herman back then. His parents were English immigrants, and he had 3 siblings. So he was the second youngest. The family mostly did farm work and odd jobs just to try to get by and make ends meet. And they were devout Methodists, so they were very religious. His parents were very strict. And his father was supposedly really violent and abusive. So that's important to know as just a risk factor for things that come later. Holmes was also suspected to engage in harming animals as a child. These 2 things are not entirely confirmed, obviously, because it's the fucking 1800s and we really don't know anybody. We can't really interview anybody about it right now. We could get our Ouija board out and try, but I feel like it's not a reliable source. But these factors are really significant when you consider how he turned out. Abuse and harming animals in childhood are 2 really big red flags when you're looking at antisocial behavior. And antisocial behavior is violent behavior when you're talking about like antisocial personality disorder. But he did awesome in school growing up. So that's actually like a mitigating factor. It's like resiliency. That's a positive coping skill, is doing well in school. But we got another kind of red flag here, is his classmates were really jealous, so they bullied him a lot. And peer acceptance is another huge deal for children. It's a risk factor for maladjustment if they are rejected by their peers. That does not manifest well regardless of other circumstances. Children need to be accepted by their peers to kind of accept themselves as part of their identity. So, teen and child relationship is very important. All right, we're going to skip ahead to a teenage, I almost said Teenage Mutant Ninja Herman, because his name is so stupid. I'm so sorry. I need to not say.
I like it a lot.
Why the fuck do I say these things? Okay, anyway, I'm shameless. All right, so he leaves for college, and he moves to a town nearby, and he gets married to a woman named Clara at the ripe age of 17, which back then that's like 25. And they have a son together. So apparently Holmes was actually really violent towards Clara, though, because she moved away and like stopped all contact. But
good on her.
She was said to have like black eyes and like, visible bruises. Like, so it was obvious that something was going wrong there. And then, she left and got the fuck out of there. Good for her. But his son's name was Robert. And he apparently turned out to be pretty successful, which is exciting. He was a certified public accountant, and he eventually served as the manager. This is so weird. He served as the city manager of Orlando, Florida.
That's very strange.
That sounds like might be a big deal. So, H.H. Holmes apparently had a successful son.
Okay.
Probably because he was not involved. Probably because his mom got him the fuck out of there. He got
the smart genes and got out.
That is exactly it.
Yep.
Good job. Good job, Mom. Good job, Clara. So, anyway, let's see. Holmes. Back to him. Not his son. Back to him. He went to medical school, and he graduated from the University of Michigan's Department of Medicine and Surgery, and he started an apprenticeship, this all sounds great, with a doctor who was famous for his work in, can you guess what? It's human dissection.
Whoa.
You would have never fucking guessed that. So you were like, excuse me, what?
I was not expecting to guess anything.
When the teacher calls on you and you're not fucking ready.
I was not ready.
Hi, what is your answer? No.
Two? 24.
He is, so he's training and learning how to dissect people. So this isn't good. It's really playing into his dark fantasies that he's already struggling with and having on a regular basis. So they were unknowingly kind of like serving his sickness through all that training. And then every job he gets after graduation is extremely short term, which I find very interesting. So not able to hold a job for very long. And sometimes he only stayed in a position for a few days.
Wow.
That's so fascinating. In most cases, something weird seemed to go on in his short time. So, like, he was working at pharmacies and hospitals, and one time a little boy went missing. Another time, a patient died after Holmes prescribed medication.
Oh, wow.
He avoided the police by denying involvement and then relocating, and then he was changing his name as well. So right before he moved to Chicago, that's when he became H.H. Holmes. He pretty much assumed a whole new identity and committed a fuck ton of insurance fraud. So he would use cadavers from school labs while he was in college to, like, do this, where he would pose them as certain people who had died and just conning and, like, collecting life insurance money. He was doing a bunch of fucked up, really gross stuff. He was also, when he killed victims, he was cleaning and selling their skeletons to medical schools. So he was finding a way to, like...
I'm making some money.
Yeah.
Cash money, baby.
It's so interesting because it seems to be like he enjoyed the whole killing and torturing, and he enjoyed all of that, but he also got to, like, he got a second reward, like a secondary reward through, like, how much he enjoyed it and profiting on it monetarily. So it's really crazy. So yeah, he's Henry Howard Holmes. He's got to have an alias to help him lay low. He's trying to avoid all those lawsuits. People are coming after him for all the fraud stuff. So now we're going to talk about his relationships, which are really interesting. We talked a little bit about Clara, who he met at a church social, by the way.
Of course.
That's nice, I guess. So even though she left him, he's still legally married to her. Okay? So that doesn't stop him from finding new love, right? I mean, so he meets and marries, yes, a woman named, it's Myrta, I think is how you say it. Okay. Myrta. And he was 25 at this time. And then a few weeks later, after he gets married, he decides he's going to file for divorce, which just seems backwards. But hey, you know, it was a different time. And he claimed infidelity on her part, which was never, ever corroborated, completely an accusation on his part. And he really had some fucking balls to do that after the abuse and everything, but sure. The divorce was actually never formally finalized either, but it ended up getting dismissed. It was a whole thing. So he goes on to have a daughter named Lucy with his new wife, and similar to his son, Lucy sounds like she was pretty successful and well-adjusted too. So he's making successful children somehow, which is wild. And great. Like, that's silver lining. Silver lining, people. It doesn't get better from here, so let's hold on to this moment where something good is kind of happening. It's not going to last. But she ended up becoming a Chicago school teacher. So, good for her.
Wow. Imagine this is your dad.
Yeah, fucking. I actually watched an interview today with a descendant of him, like a DNA descendant of his original last name, which was the one that started with an M. Hang on. What was it? Mudgett. Original last name.
Wow.
Yeah. But, of course, in true fashion, Holmes decided that he was done with that family situation, and he moved on to a third marriage. So, apparently, he always acted single, too. Like, no matter what type of relationship he was in, or if he was married, or whatever, he always kind of, like, assumed this role.
It also might have been part of the patriarchy from the 1800s.
This is true, but I still want to see his Venus
not
placement.
Completely. Oh, yeah.
I have my suspicious, and I want to see.
You're going to be interested, for sure.
Uh-oh. Is it Gemini?
Oh, we'll see.
I'm guessing. Okay, I'm guessing. So yeah, he moves on to another marriage. This isn't good either. Her name was Georgiana. They got married in Denver, Colorado. So he moves around a lot. And he was still married to the other two, except for the one that kind of like was dismissed. But like, what is he doing? Quite the ladies' man. He also had a mistress named Julia at one point. And she was one of his first confirmed, like, known murder victims.
Okay.
So this is where it, like, starts. It's hard to connect. Again, like, his victims could be anywhere from 10 to 200.
Yeah, there's so many.
So many, and they just didn't have technology back then to, like, identify people. Like, it was a whole thing.
So many went under the radar.
Yeah.
can't.
Exactly. Like, there's just no way to really confirm most of it. So, he's got a wife. He also has his mistress. And his mistress has a 12-year-old daughter named Pearl. So, Julia finds herself pregnant. And supposedly she demanded, like, you have to marry me now. Like, you got me pregnant.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, all right, I'll marry you under one condition.
One condition.
I need you to get an abortion.
Oh.
And I'm going to give you the abortion.
Oh.
So, and guess what? She doesn't survive. And magically, Pearl goes missing too. So, you have a 12-year-old girl, a pregnant mistress. He, of course, told everyone that she died during an abortion. And in the 1800s, I'm sure people were immediately feeling no fucking sympathy for her. Mm-hmm. You know, that was like super taboo, like garbage stigma back then. It's still like that. We still have states trying to overturn like Roe versus Wade. We still have that going on right fucking now in 2021. Mm-hmm. So in the 1800s, this was you know, and I'm sure that's exactly what Holmes wanted. Nobody wanted to look into that because she was, you know...
He's smart. He knows what he was doing.
He knew how to play the patriarchy really well. So I do feel like this is an undertone. I think you're picking up on 100% what's going on.
He had a lot of authority that just because the society wasn't going to look past certain things from a man.
It seems like he felt very justified in it because like women were viewed very differently, is a lot more disposable, I feel like. And like obviously he treated women like they were very disposable in a literal sense and in like a relationship sense. How he would just like toss one aside or like still be married to one. He's got a new one. He's always acted single. So he's, you know, got a whole thing going. All right, now we're going to get into the part that everybody is the most interested in. This is where we're going to get really into the dark side of things. Not that we haven't talked about dark shit already. But we're going to talk about the murder castle.
Here we go.
Murder castle. All right. So this is a wild ass concept. For those of you who aren't super familiar with the story, you might be thinking like, what the fuck is a murder castle? And the whole thing was designed specifically to support his killings. Like that was his entire goal. He was apparently very inspired by the writings of Edgar Allan Poe, which is interesting.
Oh, of course.
So he's into very dark literature, dark themes. It's like kind of fueling, again, his fantasy stuff he's got going on. He was very intrigued by the murders committed by Jack the Ripper in England, which, again, supposedly could have been him, which is why he would have been so into it. Mm-hmm. But it was something that he was known to be, like, fascinated with. So it all, again, like, is fueling that for him. But he's in Chicago. He starts working at a drugstore. You know, just doing a regular type of job, which he seemed to do.
A lot of regular jobs, yeah.
Yes, a lot of regular jobs. Hospitals, pharmacies were kind of his main gig. And when he does that, he buys an empty lot right across the street from his work. You know, convenient, right? Mm-hmm. Seems great. He's living the dream. So construction starts on this property in 1887, and it's a 2-story mixed-use building. So the second floor is retail space. The second floor is apartments. The first floor is retail space and a drugstore and like a barber shop and like really normal businesses. So starting out with 2 stories, but he was having trouble getting it built because he was such a con man. He wasn't paying anybody. So he wasn't paying the steel workers who were doing all the construction, and they just stopped working. So he kept trying that again, and he would hire a new company. At first, it was not strategic. It was a con, where he was having all these different companies working on it, and like everybody ended up suing him too for not paying. Whole thing. It doesn't stop him though. He just keeps on building. He adds the 3rd story to the structure. He tells investors and suppliers that it's going to be a hotel. And it's going to be used during the upcoming Chicago World Fair. It's like a huge deal.
It's a huge deal, guys. You're happy to be part of it.
And that part was also like never fully completed. So it just was all this kind of weird, half-done kind of bullshit at first. And of course he got more strategic with that and then wanted things built in there like secret hallways and dead-end doors and all this weird kind of like a maze in there. And he wanted it like that so nobody knew exactly what was going on. So having all the different...
No one ever saw the entire layout to the entire
Someone
place. The
did.
whole blueprint. Really?
We'll talk about them later.
Yes.
Yeah, someone did. We'll talk about them later.
Yes.
That's a fun. Yeah, that's a really fun topic. I'm glad you kind of. Ooh, foreshadowing. Spooky. Okay.
Spooky.
So the fair was like a huge deal. Over 20 million people would come there between May and October. So it was like a long term. I guess in my mind when I used to hear the story, I thought it was like, 1
like
week
a
out of the year.
weekend or a week or something. But
yeah, but apparently it was like a whole
But it
season.
takes people so long to travel there.
Oh my God,
I'm
you're
sure,
so fucking right.
I'm sure.
They can't have an event for a week. It's 1800s. So there's not even cars. Thank you for pointing out obvious things that I am not.
You're welcome. I wasn't thinking about it.
Thank you for being logical.
Aquarius moon, you're welcome.
Yay. And also thinking May through October. So for those of you who don't know, crimes are more common in the summer. It makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because when people are physically hot, like their physiology makes them more irritable. So people are more aggressive and more likely to do aggressive things in the summer because of just heat alone. But when you also have the more opportunity, more daylight, more people outside, more, there's a lot more opportunity.
More things are happening. Yeah.
So this is like prime murder time from May to October. So this is like a hunting ground basically. And Holmes used it as one. It's the perfect opportunity for him to prey on tourists. And he especially enjoyed targeting wealthy older women who flaunted the fact that they had money, which is gross. All throughout the construction of the murder castle, he's still using all these different contractors and builders. And nobody truly, except the one person I'm going to talk to you about later. God, I'm tripping over words. Nobody knew where hallways and doorways were leading. Totally on purpose. You've got the storefront on the bottom. It's a barbershop, pharmacy, jewelry store. It's normal. And then
he kind of became like somewhat of a pillar in the community.
Yeah. Of
course. Why what's wrong with him? He's great.
Got to be running a legitimate business in there. He's got to. But of course, the second floor. No, this was his elaborate torture rooms. And he also had these chutes, like laundry chutes, that led to the basement, and that's where he sent bodies down there. He had acid vats down there waiting for the bodies. He had a crematorium to dispose of them really quickly. And the way he had this crematorium, he actually told people that he was blowing glass. Even though it was like not the right size or anything for glass, it was big enough for a body, and nobody ever saw him create anything. But that was like his whole thing when he had it installed. That was his whole like, what I'm doing here.
Wow. Here's
what's going to be happening, y'all. And of course he was not doing that. So
yeah, I didn't know the glass blowing bit.
Yeah, that is an interesting fact that I picked up and just kind of wanted to note. But he had all this just so he could get rid of bodies very, very fast and dispose of his victims. And the third floor, again, more apartments. It's just terrifying to think about living above all of this, really. Like, super, super gross. And Holmes had his room up there, too. Everything's looking super chill. He also has soundproof rooms. And then the mazes and hallways that didn't really go anywhere, which is just horrifying. Can you imagine getting, like, trapped down there? And he would do that. He would often like abduct the people who worked there at the stores and like would get them up to that level and like trap them, and nobody would know what happened to them. So fucking crazy when you think about it, like his whole mentality and like his own little fun house that he was kind of in charge of.
Fun house is a very accurate and creepy term for this.
Are we looking at fifth house things?
No.
I'm speculating.
Just the way you said it,
His own little fun house. He's having a really good time. Like, he fully was enjoying this. So, super gross. But also, back to the basement. Once the bodies were down the chutes, he used surgical tables and various medical tools to dissect them before selling their organs and their bones on the black market to medical institutions. And this is trigger warning. When the police finally inspected the hotel after he was arrested, they found rooms with hinged walls, false partitions, rooms linked with secret passageways, airtight rooms that were connected to a gas line. So they were like vaults that had gas lines going through them, and he used them as gas chambers.
Wow.
So yeah, like a fun house or like a labyrinth, like his own like fucking maze. He had torture devices down there, like the kind that were used to stretch people in like medieval times, you know, like those tables with like crank and stuff. All right. That's the murder castle, you guys. We're moving on to the next section.
All right.
He's a maniac. Here we go. So, women start to go missing. Again, some of them actually worked inside the murder castle building situation.
Oh, right. The fact that people worked in the place is just insane.
Getting abducted from work.
Yeah.
And he also was watching them and, like, getting to know their patterns and their every step, and also probably fantasizing a whole lot about what he was going to do, and like really fucking thinking about it. Like he's like really enjoying this, and he has so much access to these people. It's horrific. He's secretly doing a lot of fucked up shit while everyone else is just going along with normal business. And his usual murder method was suffocating his victims. He loved using chloroform, so like overdosing them. Overexposure to light and gas fumes, trapping them in the airless vault, and he loved watching them die slowly. So he very much is enjoying like some sadist stuff, very sadistic, enjoying the pain of other people. Wow. He also claimed to have used starvation and burning victims alive as other methods of killing them, which is awful. That is like, especially starvation, like that's the absolute slowest death you can have. You can survive for sometimes up to 2 weeks with no food. So that's really disgusting to think about what he was doing in there. And of course he already had the way of disposing the bodies, and they were clever. Like he's a fucking entrepreneur, and because of his former medical education and connections, he was able to sell the skeletons to labs and universities. Like people did not question it. He was stripping the flesh off the bodies, dissecting them, preparing viable skeletons, and the rest of the remains would be tossed in pits of lime or acid. So he made bank doing this, along with his other scams and like insurance scams and stuff. So he was usually like committing a double scam. Like a murder was also an insurance scam for him, because he would pretend that this person was this other person who had died, and he would take out these fake policies and be like, oh, well, Sam Frick died over here, and here's the body, and I'm collecting this, and then I'm going to sell the body over here, and I got to have fun murdering.
It's very awful and very smart.
Yeah, he was finding,
for the time being, because there was no technology to really suss him out on this. Correct.
And every time they get close, he would like change his name or relocate, and that's why he built this whole elaborate thing to get away with what he wanted to do as long as possible. So he was getting rewarded over and over and over again for like one crime would have like triple rewards for him. So it's so gross. I cannot wait to see his chart, because now I'm like, I want to know his Jupiter. Like I want to know like certain things that I'm like,
you want to know all.
I want to know it all, but it's like these little things are making me like want to tie it to like see what he's got going on. Okay. So we're getting closer to the end of his story here. Crime and punishment. This is so interesting. Okay. Because Holmes was only convicted of one murder. That was the killing.
That's all it takes.
Yeah, that's all it takes, because he was sentenced to death. You know, you can't. Nowadays we do sentence people to like multiple things, which is interesting. Not always, but sometimes it does happen. But back in the day, they were like, "All right, fuck it, he's dying. Like we're good. We've done all we can here. We've done the work we needed to do." But this killing was the murder of his business partner and main accomplice, Benjamin Peitzel. This dude's an attorney, helps him pull off lots and lots of scams. And he was somewhat of a failure in his life. He had committed a lot of petty crimes, like forgery. He was trying really hard to support his wife and 5 kids. So he was really kind of trying anything since the 1800s. So he was a crooked kind of guy, but I feel like he was really just desperate and trying to support his family and would do absolutely fucking anything.
He was a few years older than Holmes.
Yeah, we're doing his chart as well for those of you who are asking.
So it's hard to even say, oh, he got wrapped up in something. No, he knew what he was getting.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for as much as he could have known.
And he also was a heavy drinker, so he turned to alcohol to help out with his stress level from all of this. So very heavy drinker. And the way they found each other is Peitzel put out a newspaper ad seeking work, and Holmes hired him. So it was basically, he was kind of like the puppet. He was really quiet. He was really hardworking. He was willing to do whatever was asked of him. And from what it sounds like, he was literally willing to do anything to support his family. Fucking anything. So he got into an argument with Holmes over money from a scam, and that's what supposedly resulted in his death, was a fight between them. But they were intentionally planning to stage Benjamin's death and use a cadaver to get insurance money. And his wife was in on it and everything. Like, she knew that they were going to fake his death and, like, do a whole thing. So, but Holmes just murdered him instead. And the cause of death was a large quantity of chloroform. Again, he likes to suffocate people. His wife, Carrie, again, knew about it ahead of time. She didn't realize he was actually dead because she knew it was going to be
right. She thought she was in on the plan.
Yeah, she thought she was fully in on it. So she sends her daughter. This part is so sad because she thinks that it's like a cadaver. It's not actually her husband. She sends her 15-year-old daughter, Alice, along with Holmes to go identify his body, like thinking they were faking everything. But I mean, it's awful either way. But the fact that it really was, it's just insane. This is a fucked up situation. This is some family shit that's beyond. This is some crazy family problems going on. But it was ruled as an accidental death, and the insurance company cut Peitzel's wife a fat check. And then Holmes goes on the run with all of the Peitzel children. He tells Carrie it's going to help them lay low, so he takes the money and the kids. Okay. So he's using them as pawns. Yeah. And, Carrie starts getting all these letters in the mail from Alice. So it sounds like she's fine. Spoiler alert, she's not fine. Somebody rats Holmes out for this insurance scam, and everything kind of falls apart. So he forgot to pay off some dude who somehow helped connect him in this insurance thing. Like somebody was involved and didn't get paid off. So it's kind of complicated. Yeah. That's like really summing it up right there, because it was a lot of complicated shit that I was like, we don't need to get into that. But basically he fucking didn't pay somebody off. He fucked somebody over, and they were like, well, I'm going to expose your entire thing. So that's when Holmes starts claiming that Peitzel committed suicide. But he gets arrested, and the police start looking into him and his castle. And guess what? They weren't fucking ready for all the shit going on in there. In the basement alone, they found piles of human and animal bones, bloody women's clothing, and a wooden torture table. The victims were nearly impossible to identify, which explains why he was only able to be charged with one murder once again. And that was, like you said, that was fucking plenty. He was sentenced to death, and he was executed 9 days before his 35th birthday. Like you were saying earlier, too, like he died right before his birthday, 9 days. By the way, he fired his attorneys and represented himself in court, which is a famous move of fucking psychopaths. He does seem a lot like a classic psychopath because of how intelligent he is and all of the forethought. And he's like 2 steps ahead of everybody. And he doesn't really have emotions. He doesn't really have feelings. He can mimic them. Yeah. But he doesn't actually have them, and he knows how to fool people. He's very emotionally shallow. And like, the tenacity of this guy is crazy. So it was easy for the prosecution to prove that Peitzel didn't commit suicide. So yeah, shithead. Carrie's testimony really fucked him because he killed her husband and abducted her children, who were never seen again. So he was extremely manipulative to everybody around him. He can swindle women. He could swindle business professionals into doing work for him. He could, talk his way.
He's been doing this a long time. Yeah. A lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, a lot of know-how.
This is actually funny. He even dramatically cried on the stand in front of the jury.
I'm sure.
While giving his testimony. All right, this next section is called Kill This Fucker. So, on May 7th, 1896, Holmes was hanged at this prison, I can't say, Moyamensing, I think I did it, prison. But now it's known as the Philadelphia County Prison. fun things. When we were looking at locations for the death chart, we pulled up the area because we couldn't find this prison. We were like, where's Philadelphia County? So we started looking it up. We started looking at the different prisons, and they're all on this one street. And we were like, oh, well, this must be where it's at.
At least the right spot. You know?
And then we realized that this little town is called Holmesville, and then there was like a Holmesville
prison. It was
Holmesburg.
Wasn't it?
I took screenshots of it.
Yeah.
I'll post it.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I'm convinced it has to be.
We were like, this is not a fucking coincidence. This has to be the prison.
Be.
It's just been renamed, and it's like a whole segment. Wow. But there was one that was like, Holmesburg prison. Mm-hmm. I think it was Holmesburg.
It was something like that.
But yeah, it was really crazy that we saw that because I didn't find that in my research. We found that on Google Maps, so that was fun. But until the moment of his death, Holmes remained calm and chill, showing very few signs of fear, anxiety, or depression. Again, classic psychopath right there. They're not capable of those feelings. It's Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy said the same thing. Like, I'm so lucky that I don't have to feel guilt like the rest of you. Like, I don't have that emotion. I don't know what that's like. Mm-hmm. And that's genuinely like what's going on here too. But this is so fascinating. Holmes asked for his coffin to be contained with cement and buried 10 feet deep because he was concerned that grave robbers would steal his body and use it for dissection. So, paranoid much?
Because he would have done that.
It's really fucking horrific, too, when he is hanged because his neck didn't break. He was strangled to death slowly.
He got that strong neck.
Twitching for over 15 minutes.
Wow.
He was pronounced dead 20 minutes after the trap had sprung. So,
wow.
I'm interested to see his death chart now.
I feel like he probably didn't deserve a fast death.
No.
So.
None of his victims had fast deaths. But it's just, knowing that people were watching that too is like, it's horrible.
It's hard to think of. It's hard to picture.
But he definitely deserves it. And his body was buried in an unmarked grave at Holy Cross Cemetery. It's a Catholic cemetery in Philadelphia, western suburb of Eden, Pennsylvania. In the documentary, they read his diary entries out loud. So he kept a diary while he was in prison. Wow. It was gross as fuck. So it's basically like his life story. It's written out like an autobiography. Like it's written very. He called it Holmes's own story. So yeah, he definitely went there. The excerpts themselves were really self-serving. He talked a lot about the Constitution, which was interesting. He writes it like a fantastical novel. Like he starts it out like it's a beautiful countryside. Like it was so fucking ridiculous. Like the dawn and the morning dew. Like it was very much like.
Talk about self-justification.
It was fucking ridiculous. But it's a full confession in vivid detail, and it just really allows him to relive it all again in prison. Like he's enjoying it. He enjoyed every bit of this. It's super fucked up to hear the word-for-word details of this. So I highly recommend like looking up some of this and like hearing a narrator read it is just, it's fucking crazy. He talks about burning people alive in the vaults and discussing their charred bodies afterwards. He also talks about putting people in trunks that he turned into gas chambers. He goes on to describe their faces and what they looked like after he opened the trunks in vivid detail. It's disturbing, so proceed with caution because it really, really is intense. And
I'm very on the fence if I want to look into this.
I only put a few light details in here. I did not go into just like vivid detail about what he actually said because it's a lot. And, you know, I want to give people the option to choose to go deeper there. Mm-hmm. Not everybody.
I know I would like to see more of the layout of the place.
Yeah. I would love to see like a whole model of it if anybody has it. But it's, you know, okay. We have now related weirdness. This is kind of a fun segment.
All right.
Okay. So, in 1914, the castle's former caretaker, the one person who knew the entire building, ended up committing suicide by taking strychnine, which is a pesticide designed to kill birds and rodents.
Okay.
His body was found in his bedroom with a note that read, "I couldn't sleep." His surviving relatives claimed that he had been haunted for several months and was suffering from hallucinations. I can only imagine. He took all the secrets of the murder castle with him to his grave, and then the castle itself was mysteriously gutted by a fire in August of 1895.
Wow. And Holmes died in 1896.
Mm-hmm.
So this person committed suicide in what year did it say?
1914.
Okay.
So he suffered a long time.
Wow.
That's almost like 20 years. He suffered a long time with whatever delusions and nightmares and all the horrible things that he was kind of major trauma, and there was nothing to help you back then. A lobotomy.
Lobotomy or alcohol.
Right. So with the fire, there were 2 men who were spotted entering and leaving the building, and investigators found an empty or a half-empty gas can underneath the back steps of the building. So it was arson, obviously. Somebody wanted to get rid of that building, and I can't say I blame them, But the building survived the fire and remained in use until it was torn down in 1938. But the site is currently a post office, which seems creepy as fuck, and I feel like we need to go there.
Yeah, let's go to the post office.
Have you been to the post office? Are you in Philadelphia? Or I guess Chicago. Why am I saying Philadelphia? Because of the prison. I'm stuck on the prison. I looked at Google Maps and it blew my mind, you guys. Holmesburg. Holmesburg. Okay, do you live in Holmesburg? Tell us about it. Is it weird? Okay. Anyway, so I mentioned this to you before we started recording, but in 2017, his body was exhumed after it was rumored that he had escaped execution and never died. And the speculation was strong enough that they decided to dig up his grave. So, because again, he wanted to be buried in cement. That was actually a good thing because his body was not decomposed. He still had a full mustache.
Oh, wow.
And his clothing was still intact. They were actually able to do a DNA test through his teeth and the hair follicles, but there was enough, DNA in the teeth that he was able to be positively identified. He was H.H. Holmes. They reburied him after that. So they did all that shit for nothing, which is crazy. And that, you guys, is the story of H.H. Holmes. And I don't know about you, but I am ready to chart that bitch. Let's chart this bitch.
Here we are.
I'm so excited, though. I've been so amped for this chart.
I know. I've been so curious for so long.
I did remember his sun and moon from the Astral Chat crossover episode, only because it's my absolute favorite combination, and I was joking how I probably could have dated this fucker.
Yeah, this H.H. Holmes might have been your type.
I'm specifically into a Taurus sun with a Leo moon, very specifically. Exclusively, I might say. Just love that combination for whatever reason. So it's weird. I'm interested to hear his Venus because that's the other.
Okay, so let's run through this.
Yeah,
we do not have birth times for this episode at all.
We don't have records from the 1800s.
They don't. Well, H.H. Holmes did have a birth certificate, but it did not have a time. So because I did look around for a second.
Good job on your research. I'm proud of you.
Just for a second, though.
But you did it.
Only for a moment.
You still were thinking about it, and that's what we appreciate on this podcast is the
thoughtfulness, the thought that counts on this podcast.
That's exactly it. We care about your consideration. I'm saying dumb stuff.
All right, okay. So we've got his chart pulled up here. Let me give you guys an overview, okay? We have the sun in Taurus conjunct Venus.
Really?
Conjunct Mercury.
I'm very excited.
This is all in the last decan of Taurus. So what you were talking about earlier with there being some Gemini Venus situation, his Venus is in Taurus but cusping Gemini.
I see that.
Yes, it is very close. It is at 27 degrees Taurus. The sun is at 25 degrees. The money Arabic part is at 21 degrees, and Mercury is at 19. Wow. He also has one more planet in the sign of Taurus. He has Pluto at 9 degrees. So it's not a conjunction. However, it is coming from the same energy source as, it's being influenced by the same energy source, Taurus, as a lot of his other self. It does count. He does have a stellium. So whenever someone has a stellium in a sign, it typically will come through their natal chart, whether or not it's the area of the chart you would think it would. It just kind of colors everything a little extra. His moon is in Leo, conjunct Jupiter, conjunct Vesta.
Okay.
These are all pretty close together. We have 7 degrees, or Vesta at 7, almost 8 degrees. The moon at 13 degrees and Jupiter at 18. Those are all the things he has in Leo. I'd like to consider these stelliums, but I know that not all astrologers do. But that's a pretty big Leo influence right there, especially with it being Jupiter, because you have expansion of the energy wherever Jupiter is on your chart. So, since there's no time, we have no ascendant, midheaven, vertex, anything like that. No houses.
Bummer.
I know, bummer.
That's why earlier I was like, 5th house things, and then I was like, oh, we don't have vertex. I can only speculate.
It's all good. Okay. We do have everything else, though. So let's go through some of the other planets so you guys can kind of get an idea of what this chart looks like if you're listening at home. If you are going to hop on our Patreon, though, I am going to start uploading and I will retroactively do this as well. I'm going to upload all of my charts for every episode.
Yes.
And her show notes for every episode. Yeah. So if you're interested in that, guys, hop on our Patreon.
Just real quick, we went through these on our Patreon video. These are my notes for those of you watching on YouTube. These are my notes.
She has to show these up.
It's just a
really thick, almost a book worth
every
of notes
episode.
For all of her episodes.
Every episode since episode 1, Black Dahlia, everything through. I ran across this and grabbed it and thought it would be fun to go through on Patreon. So anyway.
So yes, we're doing that on Patreon, and we're gonna have lives every couple weeks or so. So.
Every 2 weeks, we are being more consistent, you guys. We've been promising this for years. We're finally doing it. Okay.
Well, now it suits our schedule, so.
Yeah, we're getting there.
All right. So he has quite a few things over here in Gemini. I'm just going to go around from the sun sign. After Taurus, Gemini, he has Uranus conjunct Pallas. There's also some Arabic parts here, which I'll get into later. And Mars, right at the end of Gemini, at 28 degrees, cusping Cancer. And then when we actually get into Cancer, we have Ceres, and we have the South Node conjunct in Cancer, which is a very caring background, which is really fascinating. And then we talked about Leo and Virgo. We have Saturn and some Arabic parts. Nothing in Libra. Scorpio is only Arabic parts. Sagittarius, same. Capricorn, he has his North Node, obviously.
Feels very on brand. It does. Very much was that feels.
Polus retrograde in Aquarius and Chiron in Pisces. Neptune at 1 degree Aries, with Juno at 11 degrees and Lilith at 22 degrees Aries. So I'm just going to kind of run through my notes as I wrote them. We have 4 charts for this episode, so I'm not going to spend too much time on each one. Okay. So right at the top of my notes here, I put, it was interesting to look at some of the indicators. So we don't have a midheaven, which I really like to look at midheaven because it's what you're remembered as, especially when it's a well-known serial killer or something. Their midheaven usually does indicate quite a bit. Even with Amy Winehouse, her,
right.
It always shows.
Do you have a vibe for his, though? An energy read on it at all? I'm just curious.
Not too much. I have not gotten enough sleep to focus on anything like that lately. So
sorry, I just
anything extra, my brain is not going to do right now. So Alice and Uranus in Gemini. It was interesting to me how having this Uranus influenced sense of making hard decisions and wisdom and critical thinking, making it really like new age, like different, innovative, like very individualistic. And in Gemini, it's also just very airy. It's thinking from a bunch of like different perspectives, but still in terms of like the self, like what's going to benefit me, which face do I show. So having this all being involved with like his sense of wisdom and critical thinking and individuality and how he's going to create new and different things in the world. Interesting. Obviously, there's a lot of really cool aspects off of this, all these parts too. Like, let's see. So a lot of this is benefiting. There's sextiles over to his moon, Jupiter, and Vesta. Sextiles over to Juno and Aries. Juno and Aries makes him very committed to that Aries aggressive, playful energy. This isn't always even like a conscious thing. It's usually just like something that feels really like you feel like you're married to it in a good way without even thinking. Is Neptune placement, which is in Aries, which also shows his illusions and his perspective on life, his worldview, his dreams, all being influenced again with that Aries aggressive energy, that fiery warrior energy, playful at the same time. It kind of makes it where if you were going to do, I'm sure his dreams were very like more like Aries tone, like aggressive tone, fire tone. His moon also being in a fire sign. I think that there would have been a lot of that type of energy, even though he's a Taurus. Right. It kind of just makes him more grounded in the more emotional parts of his zodiac. It's what I'm thinking.
He wasn't a really emotional kind of guy.
Right.
So,
and that's another grounded thing, like when you've got all these placements in the fire signs and then you turn out to not have empathy or feelings, the only thing that really is left there is a lot of like aggression.
Yep.
That fire doesn't really go anywhere, like but you don't have the
emotional expression. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the thing that I love about, having a partner with a Leo moon is like they're very expressive, very open about their feelings. They're like able to tell me things, and I'm like, that's fantastic. That works well for me. I like knowing stuff. So, but if all that's there is like this aggression, that would not be enjoyable.
It kind of makes it where that's all that's left in a way. Especially with Mars being in Gemini too, it's very like striking. It's ready to just kind of hit through the air, like fire through the air. It's also more mentally focused. So he's like kind of more thinking about the anger and like what he's gonna do and all of that.
He's having
especially with it being in the same sign as Pallas and Uranus and everything. It also makes it where he's more unpredictable with what choices he's going to make. And if something is too far out there, kind of like Uranus is involved with aliens and things like that. If it's a concept that's too far out there, people are just going to be like unbelieving. They're not going to follow like a conspiracy theory about H.H. Holmes in the community. He's a stand-up guy.
Right.
That is crazy, So it's interesting how he was able to use this to his advantage for his purposes. And I think he was very committed to himself, with Venus being on his sun, Mercury being on his sun. His mentality and his heart are involved with his own being. But more so looking over at Moon conjunct Vesta conjunct Jupiter, because whenever Vesta is conjunct like the sun or the moon, it really makes it like a really personal placement. It makes it where you're so devoted to yourself. He is so devoted to his inner self when his inner self doesn't really even have the feelings. He's just devoted to his inner self feeling good however it's going to feel good.
Yeah.
And Jupiter expands that part of his chart and makes it where that's where he finds his personal growth. That's where he goes on his personal journey and
he
his
loves
inner life.
enjoying stuff.
It's this is opportunity. He finds opportunity through that part of his chart. I would really love to see houses, but
I know, like he's like triple enjoying everything he's doing, and it's super gross. But he's just getting so much out of it, and he's just really serving. Like you're seeing, like that part of himself. He just is feeding it and like having a good time. Like like you said, there's not emotion involved except like this. It's like pleasure.
Yeah,
that feels like it's not an emotion. That's a very primal. Alligator brain type of an instinct that we're trying to serve. It feels like very Mars energy, but like, you know. It does.
So something that I also thought was interesting on his chart, you know, as we're talking about feelings and all of that, looking at his South Node in the mother of the zodiac signs, in the nurturing Cancer energy there, conjunct Ceres, which is also with nurturing and the foundation for love and self-care, comforting feelings, and all of that being on his South Node can show that was absent in his life. It may have been something he had in his very, very early life and then lost. I'm saying that in that way because, you know, you could also have this placement and it show as you had a really nurturing childhood.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because, like, you know, we've commonly seen, like, the moon conjunct South Node and it being, like, this, you know, very negative kind of thing on a chart. So I was interested to know how this kind of manifests.
It's not something that stays, usually, when it's something like this.
Okay.
But it's stronger. I'm saying this even stronger for him specifically because there's a trine over to there's his Chiron in Pisces, which has some... other interesting aspects on it, but having it relating to his Chiron is a big deal to do with his trauma in the past. Let's see, where did I put I wanted to pull up my notes here. So when Chiron is in Pisces, it shows like a tremendous loss, grief, a feeling. And something that was really, I'm wondering if there's something really traumatic from his very early years. Because I think that's in psychology kind of how people say, not psychopath, what's the word I'm looking for?
Are you talking about?
Where you lose empathy and feelings and things like that. You don't.
So it's, you know, are you talking about the diagnosis for it?
Generally speaking, yeah.
So you're going to look at conduct disorder as the first thing that manifests. And so that's you actually have to be diagnosed with conduct disorder in childhood to be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. That's
where I'm going with this.
Is that where you're trying to go into?
Yes, so if I'm saying if he had a really young trauma, it would make it more likely for that to be the case later on.
Right, and I'm assuming, this is completely assumption, we can't confirm this is fucking 1800s, you guys, so, but I've said that a lot, but we need to be reminded that, like, there's not a way to confirm this, but there is so much talk of his father being extremely strict, his family is very strict, and I'm sure that came with a lot of strict punishment, and think about 1800s child punishment, like, 1960s child punishment scares me to think about. Yep. So, like, 1800s is... It was probably horrific, you know, and he had a lot of siblings. You know, he had 3
and really no accountability for anything, so.
I feel like there was probably some over-the-top abuse going on in the early childhood that surely, you know, kids will learn to dissociate from that at some point, and that's where kind of a separation of the self can happen, separation from your own feelings, and then an inability to understand other people's feelings, and it is a, you know, abuse has very negative impact on all children, even children that are the most resilient. Like, abuse is very difficult to treat, you know, because of the trauma and the lasting trauma and PTSD, and just it's very challenging, especially if somebody doesn't get help until much later in life. If they're not actively getting help when they're younger, you know, and working through it, it manifests over time, and it can manifest very negatively if they don't have enough, you know, mitigating factors in their life to kind of counteract.
And with Chiron and Pisces, it's really a devastating place to have it, because it makes you end up feeling like life is pointless in a way. Like, you've lost your God early in life. You lost faith in everything. It's kind of like, well, what's the point? Like, I'll just do what I'm gonna do.
That does seem like his attitude 100%.
The way to cope through this placement in a healthier way is to find your own personal, maybe an alternative form of spiritual healing. You can help open up people's eyes to the universal order in your alternative type of spiritual life. So usually you would kind of lose your sense of faith in the earlier stages of this Chiron placement, and then you would go through this dark state phase, and then you would find a new path.
Got it.
So
I think a lot of people go through that just in life if you're raised in a really religious home, and then like maybe it felt abusive or manipulative, and you get out and it's like then you figure out your own, like what do I actually believe outside of
right. And this could be literally with religion or with just your sense of self, your sense of life, your sense of existence. It's really
spirituality in general,
an intense placement. It can also show like your own mental prisons that you're involved with. It can show through this is Pisces, so your dreams. It can show through your intuition and having a lot of trauma in that area, or feeling like you are less than because of your intuition and your dreams, things like that. So I think this is also extra fascinating with right here semi-sextile to the Chiron placement, Neptune, the ruler of Pisces, being in Aries, influencing this with more aggression, coloring his world view with more of that Aries energy, and having having that be related to the trauma through it ruling that sign is really fascinating. I think that in combination, it's not obviously it's not great with the rest of his chart.
It didn't turn out well.
Obviously didn't turn
Spoiler alert. Didn't.
We were talking about his south node. Let's talk about his north node.
Okay.
His north node being in Capricorn, I think, is very telling with him creating his own empire with this. He created his literal castle. He reached the peaks of the murder goals, I would say.
Peak of his murder goal.
This is the epitome of Capricorn goal achieving type of thing. And then I think the whole fantasy of even coming up with this place is very Pisces influenced, and he's very devoted to these inner dreams and feelings that he wants this. Like I said, he's very devoted to himself. He does have the mental ability to come up with unique, interesting, elaborate plans, especially with Mercury being so close to the sun. And we've got Pallas and Uranus in a really interesting spot. And also, Saturn is in Virgo. So his ability to structure his life with all these details and like routines and day to day. It also shows through where people saw his life as very mundane, ritualed, routine, like nothing out of the normal there. Like
wow.
I think he really obviously excelled at kind of running his life that way with Saturn being in Virgo, and he was able to use it to his own
advantage.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yay. I helped.
I'm thinking if there's, let's see, anything else on here. I see that conning ability through that Leo placement, especially as he's so devoted to his own inner self. He already doesn't care about what else is happening around him. So his worldview is very like, but as long as he's doing right by himself,
he's good.
He's good, and he's building his empire. I feel like he will feel like he's on the right track. I forgot to say, with his mental ability stuff, having Pholus in Aquarius retrograde really makes that internalized extra. Aquarius is really thinking on like those higher perspectives and being able to kind of create this library of information type of thing. Very logical, very intellectual sign. So there is a little bit of extra boost of Aquarius energy with Pholus being there, especially with his internal self and things that are hidden, things that are like more private, which we see with the murder castle being a secret. So
it's so wild. This is such a crazy story. It's such a it's crazy to think this fucking actually happened. It's terrifying.
Yeah, he was quite the guy.
Quite the guy.
I think I want to, let's overlay his
death.
Now let's do his death chart next. All right, so overlaying his death chart, I also see this this Jupiter trine Lilith growth through your aggressive self-empowerment. Yes, please. You need some of that. All right. His death was May 7th, 1896. It was a Thursday.
Important. Importante.
It was very close to his birthday. The sun was at 17 degrees Taurus, where he's at 25 degrees. It is square to his natal moon placement. And it looks like square his Jupiter. So that's kind of interesting right there, where you had his planet of growth and his inner self being conflicting with the solar power, the god of the universe, or our universe in a way. Maybe not universe, but solar system. The vitality conflict with the growth is kind of telling of not being able to continue your adventure of life and growing as a person.
Cut off.
You just cut it off.
Cut off.
Let's see. He does also have moon quincunx the moon. The moon was in Pisces conjunct Mars conjunct Ceres, which is very interesting considering that his Mars and Ceres are so close on his own natal chart. They were involved with each other already. They were just barely conjunct if you consider 10 degrees. There's this blocked feeling or chained to type feeling from these. I think it brings up those themes. The emotional themes of that day were on aggression and your basis for love and that nurturing energy and having it reflected on so close to his south node on his chart. I think if he was passing and he was moving through the energies, emotionally that would be kind of triggering because it's bringing up those themes from his past on the day of his death, which is emotional themes of his traumas and being in the sign of his Chiron. And on the day of this, the North Node and Pallas were conjunct his Chiron placement. So when this kind of cycle comes up on a chart, especially like Chiron stuff and traumatic things, and really anything where you need to like learn a lesson to move forward, you kind of repeat the same issues over and over until you learn the lesson and you move on, and you find a healthy way to handle it and you move on. You empower yourself out of it or whatever, heal from it. You can start a healing journey, and then that cycle becomes more and more beneficial as it goes around. But when you aren't on a good path with that, things get more extreme every time that cycle comes back around, and you get to his level of extreme, and you're about to be hung in front of, your town. Having the North Node and Pallas triggering his Chiron right here, you can tell that this is part of his Chiron journey of making things worse and worse and worse and worse, and now he's made it as worse as he can, and he's gonna die.
You took it as far as possible.
I think he took it as far as possible. You see that Chiron is being activated for his death, so that's fascinating. Lilith was also back in Aries on the day of his death. And Juno was back in Aries, conjunct his Juno on the day of his death. So we see a lot of returns kind of coming around and a lot of things activating these really aggressive and traumatic parts of his chart, which I think is always really telling as far as the energies go. It's like, all right, we got to deal with this energy as it comes up again. So,
that's crazy.
let's see.
It's like one more time to try to deal with this energy. There you go.
Yes. Venus had also returned back to Taurus, where his natal Venus is.
He's having his return like all over the chart.
Several places.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Anything else on here I want to mention? Uranus and Saturn were both retrograde in Scorpio. And they were opposite his sun and the transit sun of that time. So, let's see. The South Node was on his Saturn, which you could also look into as a time period of him having to reflect on the life structures of his past. Where I'm wondering if this is where he was in a little bit. How long was he in prison?
I don't actually remember. I don't feel like it was that long before they killed him. Back then, you didn't sit on death row for 10 fucking years like you do now. Like, they killed you pretty fast. Because I can't remember, like, the difference between the arrest date and his death date. I don't even know that I included in my notes. I don't always include dates and stuff because it gets fucking boring. Especially if it's like in 1891 and then 1894. Does anybody fucking care?
Well,
if you want
for
to
astrology charts, you might care.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, when I'm telling the story, I feel like people don't really hold on to that info, or it like kind of passes through. And there's so much information that I like have to decide if I want to include it or not. And sometimes I'm just like, that feels like it's not relevant to the story, but it is relevant to the astrology. So
if there's any important dates, go ahead and throw them in there.
Yeah, I should have.
But we're good. We're I think that you're right though. He wouldn't have sat on death row for a long time.
Right.
He also didn't get very old in this process. So
I'm really gonna look back at this for a second.
He has the South Node there, so I feel like this was related to his imprisonment. He also had Jupiter back in Leo, having a Jupiter return. So a lot of things were kind of cycling back around for him around the time of his death, which we tend to see on these death charts, which I really like seeing. Even though it's not an atonement, it's kind of like, well, at least you had to face that energy again, and it was painful. Maybe karmic, you know.
Like last thing to kind of deal with, like the last, the whole last day, he was being forced to kind of deal with everything that he'd done, I guess, or all those past energies.
So I'm gonna pull up Benjamin's chart. We'll talk about him for a minute.
Right, Peitzel.
He was also a Taurus at 28 degrees, so their sun signs were similar. They might have, very close together. They might have kind of resonated on that level, their general selves. His moon was opposite. He was born on a full moon over in Scorpio.
Spooky. No.
Very spooky.
I just want to say that.
Very spooky. Let's see, he's got trines from his moon over to Neptune and Jupiter. Jupiter he had in Aries, and Neptune he had in Pisces. So there's again more of this like Pisces influence of like really, we actually have Pisces, Neptune and Pisces right now recently. So this energy might feel familiar to a lot of us lately, with this kind of dreamy creativity, ethereal energy being in its own sign. It's fun. Really strengthening. And having Jupiter be in Aries, where Holmes had his Neptune, I think is very telling as well. And it shows that he found opportunity through that same energy space. So him connecting with Holmes really would work out as an opportunity for Benjamin.
Oh, I see that.
Okay. Let's see. He also, there's something else interesting. Benjamin's North Node is right in Aries, where Holmes's Lilith was. So again, with their energies intermingling, you can see where like he was headed for Holmes's self-empowerment, aggressive situation, trait. So he was headed for that as he went further and further down the path with him, because he is ultimately activating that energy in Holmes and like vice versa.
Right.
Let's see. He also has Venus in Taurus.
So he has like everything in Taurus.
Oh, he has several things in Taurus. He has Pluto at 4 degrees 44 seconds, which is cool. Venus, Vesta, Pallas, Uranus, and the Sun all in Taurus. They both had a lot of Taurus energy.
Yeah. That's wild. Okay.
Benjamin had Saturn in Gemini, Mercury in Gemini, and Ceres in Gemini. Also all within 10 degrees of each other. So a good bit of Gemini energy coming through. He also being able to base his life off of like Gemini energy, where Virgo is a more grounded type of basis, foundation for life, structure for your life. Gemini is more kind of I almost picture like a door-to-door salesman working for different companies, like especially with Mercury being there too, and Ceres like having his foundation be a little more kind of go with the wind, like I'm gonna go where there's an opportunity here. I'm gonna work for them, and I'm gonna work for them, and I think that was kind of the case, the situation he was in, especially if he ended up having to work for Holmes.
Well, and the way he found Holmes was through marketing himself in the newspaper. So he's putting out ads for himself, like hire me. So he is that like
very
salesy.
Gemini.
Yeah, it is that sales energy. Like I can adapt to any job, just like hire me and I'll do anything.
That's very much what like that Saturn and Gemini can be. It's like you're just having to adapt to these other like different social situations, like different little groups, social groups. And
he like seemed to like really go all in when he did it too. Like, okay, well I'll do anything you say now.
Yes,
like I'm doing it and I'm gonna do it. It's like it feels very extreme. He's got some
an extreme placement he has next is opposite his Jupiter, which is tied to those opportunities and things. Is Mars conjunct Lilith. Lilith is in Virgo and Mars is in Libra, but they're within 4 degrees of each other, so both on the cusp right there, really tight. So you have a lot of fire, a lot of self-empowerment energy there, but it's like more in the passive type signs, where Holmes had him in more aggressive signs. A very the murder moon sign, Aries, and he had Mars in Gemini. So again, like he has this more passive, aesthetically like a pleasing kind of people pleasing type of Mars placement. Where he's going to be more motivated to make like an appealing pitch to someone, or like he's going to be more motivated to, do something to make things look nice, or do things to mediate. And he's more motivated in that way, and he was going to empower himself more through doing little tasks and chores and having routines and reaping the rewards of previous work he's done, kind of all that Virgo stuff.
He literally was willing to like fake his own death. Like it's that extreme where he's like, oh yeah, sure, I'll fake my own death, no problem. We got a body replacement, cool. Let's get this insurance policy going. And like and
having that moon in Scorpio, there's things with the taboo and things like that with your inner self. So like if they got to know each other pretty well, and it sounds like they were kind of close, like I could see the Scorpio part of him not being too fazed by like something extreme, if it benefited him, for sure, because of that trine over to Jupiter and Neptune. So he has Pholus in Capricorn retrograde. Let's see, he has Chiron in Aquarius retrograde and Juno in Aquarius. So again, that Aquarius energy is a little bit more unconventional. be able to trying to think of the big picture. He's really committed to that Aquarius energy. Things that are not in the norm may not be something that. And with Chiron being there, it makes it a little more complicated.
He's not mainstream.
He's not He's
not a basic bitch.
He's not that it's really. He would have had this like lack of acceptance, or he would have been kind of different or weird, especially in the earlier stages of his Chiron journey. But then as he overcame that, he would have been really like owning himself and accepting who he is and things like that. But he's also very committed to Aquarius energy, so it might have made his Chiron situation a little easier to go through and overcome. But it also would have made it where he's more open-minded to strange situations.
Oh, yeah.
Is what I'm kind of getting at. And having the impressive castle. Like, oh, I'm working at that big building. Like, this is like a real legit, interesting, good place to work. And I feel like it...
Probably felt really prestigious.
All the tourist placements would have been content with that, and he's trying to do the best he can with his family. I have his death chart as well, so I'm gonna pull that up over it.
This is his chart as being a victim in a really weird insurance murdery scandal that's just really crazy. That whole thing is so crazy. I can't imagine agreeing, like, even though I trust you so much, if you were like, hey, I've got a plan and we're gonna, okay, hear me out. I'm gonna need you to fake your own death and I've got a body. I might be like,
but think about if there was no technology to like really catch us.
Oh, well, then I'd be down. No.
Like it would have been much easier to fake a death back then.
It's almost just imagining hearing somebody propose this to me. It would be like, how about let's do you instead. Like, I'd be more like, how about we fake your death instead? I like this idea, except for the part where it's the dead one.
Gotcha.
Can we flip it?
Maybe if I had something I really wanted to go do, like, oh, I'd really want to live this other life. Maybe. If I needed to start over.
I needed a fresh start. We've got a plan. This is awful. Okay, anyway.
All right. So his death chart, right away we see the moon back in Scorpio. He had her lunar return. Coming in when he died.
With death.
Oh yeah. The South Node was back in Libra where his natal one is, and again, so the North Node is back in Aries where his natal North Node was. So, oh man, just looking at all the things here. The Sun was in Virgo. Which is what did Holmes have in Virgo again? Saturn. He had Saturn in Virgo.
And didn't Venus too? Didn't they both? No, Taurus. That was Taurus. Sorry.
Yeah, they both had Venus and Taurus.
That's right.
But the transit North Node was right over his Jupiter, which was one of those big ties to him and Holmes energetically on their charts against each other. So I think having another indicator of that being the cause of his death is interesting. His South Node, or not his South Node, but the transit South Node being in Libra conjunct Mars and Lilith show that he was, and Chiron was there, so it shows this inability to fight for himself, empower himself out of the situation. So he was more vulnerable during the time of his murder, physically and psychologically too, but obviously he fell for this.
Right. This is some pushover energy that we're
well, I mean, easier to be manipulated. So
yeah.
I feel for him, man. Neptune was conjunct Pluto, conjunct his Ceres, so he might have been like more susceptible to deceit related to like his wife and things, people that really cared for him, his foundation for love, all of that
His wife and
nurturing. They really, it definitely shows that theme. These are long-standing planets, they move slowly. So this shows this was not like an abrupt lie. This was like a lie that they were working on. Like this was in works. It had been in the process. It's also conjunct his Mercury. So a lot of like mental conversation and planning again with that being there. It's all in Gemini. Trying to put through the phases that you need to kind of get further.
Because like, what was he supposed to even do while he was supposedly dead? You know what I mean? Like, that's a part that isn't really addressed because obviously the plan didn't go how it was supposed to. But like, what was the plan for him to just like go to a different city and lay low for a while and like wait for the money to come through? Like, well, he would have had to think about that. He would have had to think and consider the personality he was going to take on and like what kind of alias he may have been, supposed to use or whatever. So that's interesting to throw in and think about with that Gemini energy. So,
and Jupiter was conjunct his Saturn, and it was square his natal Jupiter and square the Mars and Lilith on the South Node thing that I talked about. So again, that shows a lot more loss of opportunity, conflict, issues with opportunity, issues with sticking up for himself and fighting for himself. I know.
The Synastry charts are like, they're just crazy when there's so much in the same spots because it's like all the returns for these guys.
And in some of them,
It's wild to look at for me. Like, I'm still getting used to seeing two charts on top of each other.
Let's see. Is there anything else we want to look at? We can see Holmes on Benjamin's death day. So Holmes's natal chart overlaid with Benji's death.
Benji
He killed him.
What do you see there? Anything?
So here we have. I kind of touched on this already with a second ago, but the North Node being over his Neptune and Aries, since they have a lot of that Aries connection. See, Venus was over his Moon and Jupiter, and the Moon was square his natal Moon. So he might have had a little bit of internal, heart space conflict if he experienced that, which it seems like he really didn't experience.
I feel like if he did,
it would have been so minimal.
It would have been.
These energies were coming up, but I think that they weren't strong because it wasn't.
I feel like it was more about losing his partner in crime. I don't think it was like what you're saying. Like, it's not like remorse and sadness. Right. It's like, it feels like a conflict of interest. Like, I really, like, I'm going to kill him because I'm, for whatever reason.
Like,
but
what
also,
if I need him later?
Yeah, also, he's been so useful. This is kind of a bummer that I have to kill him. It's kind of like, it doesn't, like you said, there's just not emotional involvement. Yes. It's very logically based. Like, oh, well, now who's going to help me? Like, I relied a lot on this person. So this was, did I just fuck myself over by getting rid of my right hand kind of thing? That's so interesting.
I see that deceit thing I mentioned with Pluto and Neptune. I'm looking at that now, and I see it over his Pallas and Uranus. So again, that deceit on top of his erratic critical thinking, him making those choices that are so unique to him. It really shows how those things lined up with this trait of his and how he really flipped it on them and sold them this idea, and then maybe they made a plan, and then he had this other scheme going on just to do his own thing at the last minute. And I almost wonder how if he planned it that whole time, or if it was just like at the last minute, he's like, actually, gonna do this. Because I could see it going either way with this placement.
That's so interesting.
But you would need both of those skills to even do something like that. So it's Hilly hit the right part of it.
He always had like schemes on schemes, so he was the ultimate con man. And he just, the more schemes he had wrapped into one, it seems like the more he enjoyed it. So like almost like deception was part of like what made it so fun for him.
Jupiter was over his Mars, so that aggressive thing, and it was an opportunity for him. It was an opportunity to grow. He had that hitting his chart. Let's see, Lilith was over his Pholus, and in the same sign as his North Node. So it was tied in with that feeling of empowering himself on this day would have been related to the feeling of his building his empire and moving forward. Also to do with like, oh wow, I'm so extra at my Aquarius mentality of figuring these things out. So let's see. What else do I want to mention? Anything on here else?
He was just so gross. He was just so gross. Like, it's, the more I think about how much he enjoyed the elaborate scheme of it all, the more I'm like,
and the more and more uncaring he became with that South Node being Cancer and the North Node being Capricorn, like moving away from that caring energy more and more so.
Everybody was like disposable. Everybody was like a transaction. Almost like he just, super, super gross. Anything else that you're saying that you want to talk about? Are we good?
I think we're gonna call it for this guy. If you guys have any questions, let me know though.
Yeah. So reach out to us, interact with us. Definitely give us a like and rating and review and comments and subscriptions and follow.
All of the things.
All of those things, because wherever you are, one of them or more than one may apply. But yeah, please follow us. Please interact with us. We'd love to have you join our Patreon. We are continuing to come up with more ideas and more cool stuff to give you more behind the scenes access. And let us know what you want to hear for season 3. We still have one more episode of this season, and it's going to be a big one. We're going to be doing something kind of extra. And
very new, very big. Very
again,
different.
We announced all this to Patreon, so you guys already know. But for everybody else, we're just giving you a little tease, not a spoiler.
If you want to find out, get on Patreon. Links are all in the description or on our link tree if you go to our Instagram.
Yes. All right. I think that's all we've got. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for returning. If you're a returning listener, if you're new, welcome. We love you. We appreciate every single one of you. Continue to love yourselves and chart all the bitches in your life. Goodbye.
Goodbye.